you couldn't see like normal. You couldn't just kind of look out and see so I had to drive my Ranger around, kind of checking all the pockets, all the trees, looking for the sheep. And they were, of course, in the farthest corner, hiding under some trees, I'm sure scared. And, they don't want to come in. They don't want to come up by the road. And so Jill had to, gather them all up and bring them. And, it's hard to see. I couldn't really always see her to make sure she was doing her job. I just had to trust her that she wasn't going to leave any sheep behind.
Hey guys, this is a nail biter episode. It is a very exciting story of escape from the 2020 Oregon fires. Our guest, Trudy Vickland, and her family had to evacuate their home and their ranch and all of their animals. And this is a really great story with some great messages and great information at the end. I'm not going to talk a lot, but I do want to apologize for the wind noise in the background. We were both recording during winter storm, so I'm not exactly sure whose end it was on. She had a winter storm going on when we were recording, and I had a winter storm going on while we were recording in Texas. So who knows, but it adds a little bit of drama and excitement to the story to have that wind whipping in the background. Enjoy the episode. Go to theinstinctiveaussie.com. We have a new look. I hope you enjoy it. Let me know what you think about it. Feel free to click the orange button and leave me a message. Talk to me and the listeners about your dogs, and we'll put your great stories on the air. Everybody loves to hear it. Enjoy the episode, and I'll see you later. This podcast is dedicated to the celebration and preservation of the working Australian Shepherd. Your Aussie is descended from a proud and amazing lineage of hard-working ranch dogs, identified and cultivated primarily in the Wild West. Contrary to the breed name, the Australian Shepherd is actually an American breed success story. Only in America can a blue-eyed, scruffy dog rise from the dust of the American ranch to become one of the most popular breeds in the world today. The Aussie's beauty, brains, and incredible work ethic and almost empathic connection with their human charges make them unforgettable and pivotal members of the family. My goal is to help you understand this amazing breed, learn more about their heritage and their physical and mental needs so that together we can preserve the working Aussie by encouraging better breeding and better vetting of future Aussie owners, ultimately keeping Aussies with their families and out of shelters. Welcome to the Instinctive Australian Shepherd. Hey everybody, Jackie Tinker here with the Instinctive Australian Shepherd, and I have Trudy Vickland with me today. Trudy's going to tell us a really awesome, interesting, terrifying story where her Aussie ends up sort of being a hero in this story as well. And I'm really excited to have her on the show, and I'm going to just jump right in and let her start talking about this exciting thing. We're calling it the fire at Double V, and Trudy and her family survived some of those really bad fires that we had in 2020, and she lives in Oregon. And remember, I don't know if y'all remember, but the Pacific Northwest kind of was burning down last summer. So I'm just going to pass it over to Trudy. Thank you so much for being on our show. And why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
Okay. Well, thanks for having me on the show. It's pretty exciting. I've never done a podcast before. But I've had Australian Shepherds about 20 years, and it's the only breed for me that I've been working for a long time on our farm. My husband has Kelpies, and he's really liked the Kelpies, but I've really liked my Aussies. And the different Aussies I've had, I kind of started with my first dog, and then just kind of started a breeding program from there. And each one of my dogs has been a successor of the dog I had before.
Very nice. How did you get into the breed?
When I was young, one of my friends had an Australian Shepherd, and I just thought it was like the coolest dog, and they used to let me train it and play with it because I was really into dog training when I was a kid. And then when I got older and we started getting livestock and stuff, I was just like, well, that's the breed that I want to try. And I just seen them and liked them. That was kind of the gist of it.
Oh, very cool. So tell us about, you live in Oregon, right?
Yeah, Molalla, Oregon.
Awesome. And so where about in the state is that, so we can kind of picture it in our mind?
Like the nearest airport would be the Portland airport. We're probably about an hour south and a little bit east of Portland.
Okay, cool. And so we're going to talk about the fires, and I want to hear your story. I have a really great blog post, guys, that I'm going to post to the show notes at theinstinctiveaussie.com, so you can check that out. And it goes kind of day by day, and it was written by one of Trudy's friends. But Trudy, go ahead and how long were the fires burning before they became really close and dangerous?
I probably couldn't even really answer that because they were burning up in the mountains, I believe, for a fair bit before I was even really aware of them being a
Mm-hmm.
problem. Fire danger isn't something I've really ever dealt with or lived in an area that had a fire concern. And so to me, the fact that there was random wildfires up in the mountains was just kind of a back burner thought. And I
Mm-hmm.
do think that the two big fires that got close to me were the Beachy Creek fire and the Riverside fire. And I do think they were burning for they had started quite a bit before we were actually aware of them and afraid. It was the fact that we had a huge windstorm that came in, unprecedented winds for our area. And it just raged those fires out of control and pushed them basically towards civilization out of the mountains.
Were you guys having a really dry year? Because we don't really think of Washington, Oregon as being kind of a hot, dry timber box.
Yeah, we were having a dry year, but I also think that that's pretty typical for my area. Come August, we're usually in a pretty good drought situation. We have a ton of rain all winter, a ton of rain in the spring and early summer, but then by the time we get like August, September, our grass is drying off pretty good, and we're looking pretty brown that time of year, most every year, I would say.
Okay. So let's start. September 7th is where you guys started becoming nervous about this, I guess. September 7th, 2020.
Yeah. I think the September 6th was when the big windstorm came in, and then I remember September 7th was the day I was actually started to be aware of the fires myself. We had company over, out of town company that had traveled a long way to hang out with us, and we were just outside training dogs like we like to do. And there was a fire, a smaller fire that started just right in our town, just about 2 streets over from me, called the Wilhoit fire. And we could see the smoke from it from our house. We were watching that thinking, oh, there's a fire right there. But it didn't really occur to me that they would not get it under control. I think I was just thinking, well, we have firemen around and there's a fire and they'll get it under control. So we just kind of kept training dogs and watching the smoke and thinking, wow, I can't believe that. And we started seeing trailers go up and down the road, and what they were doing was they were evacuating a big horse stable. And that kind of started getting me thinking, like, well, that horse stable is just down the road from me.
Mm-hmm.
And but we had company, so we were trying to not make a big deal about it, and just like, oh, it'll be fine. But it did start getting more scary as we saw more horse trailers going back and forth. And Dave and I did kind of talk about, oh, maybe we should, check things out and stuff. So we did start watching the news a little bit and checking the reports on that day, I remember.
So tell us a little bit about how many you have sheep and ducks and dogs, and so what's the number of animals that we're talking about at your place that you have to be concerned about?
We have a lot of dogs because we have 3 livestock guardian dogs, which are big white dogs that
Mm-hmm.
basically are outside only dogs. They live with the sheep and protect them from coyotes. And those dogs aren't usually used to like traveling and moving around. And then I have 4 Australian Shepherds that I use for working on the farm and for herding dogs. And my husband has 3 Kelpies that he uses. And then I had two border collies that I had in for training, and I was boarding them as I trained them. So that was quite a few dogs. And then we had 11 ducks and 117 sheep. So quite a few sheep too.
Yeah, that's a big operation up there. So when did you start to realize, and so you kind of started to realize it was maybe getting dangerous and stuff? What was were you going to evacuate when they told you to? Were you going to hold out to the last minute? What were you?
I think we weren't even thinking evacuation right at the beginning, because I just think we were like not thinking it would happen. We were thinking it wasn't going to come. But then like a couple people started messaging me, a couple friends that were kind of watching it a little bit closer. They were like, do you guys are in the evacuation zone. By the time we even realized we were in an evacuation zone, we were at level 2. And I don't know how much you know about fire evacuations. Now I know a whole bunch about them, but they have 3 levels of evacuation, and level 1, level 2, and level 3, and they call them ready, set, go. And ready means, just be aware, be watching, be ready to get your stuff loaded. And then level 2 is get set. That means have your stuff loaded in the car and be ready to leave at a moment's notice. And then 3 is go. It means get out. And by the time we were even aware of levels and stuff, we were already at a level 2. So when we were at a level 2, we were like, okay, so we started like getting stuff together, which was basically just paperwork for us, because we had so many dogs that we need to get out that we really didn't have room to take belongings. It was more about, let's get all the dogs out first. And so we did get some paperwork, I would say some bank information, birth certificates, titles to the vehicles, all the dog registration paperwork that you need, for registering the dogs and stuff. We did get all that together, but then we basically just loaded our vehicles with our dogs. We packed the dogs in, because the guard dogs don't normally go in the car. So we had big crates, and we just got all the dogs, dog food, bowls, everything jammed into the car. And then we drove up to my parents' house, which is about an hour north in Washington, and they just have a little yard. And we just took all the dogs and put everybody there. And what was happening at the time was the 2 big fires, which were the Riverside and the Beachy Creek fires, were in the mountains to the east of us. And those 2 fires were getting closer and closer together. And when they were predicted to merge, that was the big fear, because those 2 fires merging, they said, was going to send up a big flare up and send ash and other debris all out into the environment. It was going to start massive small fires everywhere. And so that was why it was like a big, all of a sudden rush to get out, is because they thought those 2 fires were going to merge, and they were only a mile apart. And our farm was like just in front of the corridor where they were going to merge in. And so we were like, it was basically like a traffic jam trying to get out. It made me understand why you're not going to get out quick, because everyone's getting out. And it was just painstakingly slow. If there was a real fire on our tail at that point in time, it would have been bad, just because there was so much traffic. And it just kind of showed me that that's a big part of the reason why they're doing the evacuation when they do, is because they need to get the roads cleared, because people were just mass heading out, that the traffic was just so slow getting up to my parents' house. I mean, it took hours to get up there.
Wow.
Which was normally just an hour drive.
I can't even imagine that nerve-wrackingness of that, and also getting 2 livestock guardians in a car, because I have 2 of them, and I'm thinking, how would I ever get them in the car?
Yeah, they were, especially one of ours was very afraid. Like she had not been in a car much, and but she's a good girl, and she just did it. But yeah, and then the other 2 had been in cars a little bit more and did better. But one of our guardian dogs is just super, super old, and so it was just a lot of stress for him, just because he's very old and ancient. So it was kind of like, take care of him, make sure he doesn't get too stressed out by this whole thing.
Yeah, exactly. So you end up leaving your livestock, you go drop the dogs off, and then you made a couple trips back, didn't you, to go pick up stuff and get your
but not that first day, because that first day it was like, get out and don't come back. It was pretty scary. It was like they thought the fires were going to merge, and it was get out and don't come back kind of thing. And there wasn't time to come back because the traffic was so bad. Like you couldn't come back for your sheep at that point. So what we did is, before we left with the dogs, we opened up all the pastures and turned all the sheep out together, which meant our rams ended up going in with the ewes when they shouldn't be. And then also our neighbor had some sheep, and they had a heavily wooded pasture. So we let her sheep come in with our sheep because we have a lot of open grassland. And we just filled the water troughs, put out a bunch of hay because we had no clue what was going to happen. We didn't know if we could come back at that point. We had just no idea. So we were just trying to leave them with the best chance of survival that we could. But as it turned out, then that night, I stayed up all night. Actually, my husband was leaving out of town, so he ended up going out of town because he had a business trip he was going on. And we didn't really think there was anything to be done anyway. So then I stayed up all night kind of listening to the fire broadcast, and it ended up that the fires didn't merge as expected. The winds changed and the fires never merged, and they massively slowed down. So then the second day, it was still pretty scary, but people were going back to get more belongings. So I had a friend meet me down at my pasture and get out, and she brought her big trailer, a big double-decker trailer, and we were going to get out as many sheep as we could. So I went down with Jill. I left all the other dogs at my parents' house, of course, and Jill and I went down, and we found the sheep who were hiding in the smoke. I mean, you couldn't see. I was driving our Ranger around, and the ash in your eyes, like, it just was painful. You wanted to put on sunglasses, but you couldn't see for sure with sunglasses because there was just no daylight because of the smoke. And we got the sheep, we brought them up to the road, and then my friend arrived, and it just took a long time, and it was kind of scary because that was the day that the sky was orange and there was ash in the sky and there were bugs everywhere. It was a scary day. I remember just feeling like a little bit of panic that day, like we need to just get out of here. And of course we couldn't fit all the sheep on the trailer, so we had most of them, but I think there was approximately 10 sheep that we just couldn't get on safely. And so we turned those sheep back out, and we're like, okay, we hopefully can come back tomorrow. But we didn't know, but we were like hopeful because of the way the fires had slowed down. And we're like, okay, well, so we took the bulk of the flock, and they went to my friend's house in Dallas. And so we hauled them down there, unloaded them. And then by that time, I just went back to my parents' house because once it starts getting dark, you really don't want to be. It's so smoky and the visibility driving, you just don't want to be out there in the dark. So I went back home, and then the next day was again the same situation. The fires were still very slow, and people were going back to get more belongings and stuff. And so I was like, okay, we're going to try and go back for the last of the sheep and the ducks. And so I had another person with another trailer, and it was the same situation. They're going to meet me there, and I drove down. They drove down. They actually ended up beating me there because they were coming from a closer location. They got there before I did, and they found my rams and the couple of ewes left, and they just took them and called me, and they said, hey, I got the sheep. We're gone. And those sheep ended up going to a farm in Woodburn. And I was most of the way down there, so I still went down there because I was going to go get my ducks. But then when I got there, most of my ducks were gone, and my neighbor's llama was gone. And my neighbor had left the llama. My neighbor said, we can't get the llama out. We're just leaving them and hoping for the best because they couldn't get the llama out. And so my ducks were gone, except for two. There were still two ducks, so I got those two ducks. And then I went home back to my parents' house, and I was trying to figure out where my ducks were because there were rescue groups going around just taking animals off properties. And lots of people were not being able to find their animals afterwards. And so I started calling around like, did somebody go and get some ducks on Herman Road? Like, did someone go? And I just called around until I finally found somebody who says, yes, I got ducks on Herman Road. And so then I went, tracked down and got my ducks, which I was glad I was able to, because a lot of people that had that happen, they never got their stock back again. There were several people after the fires that were like, whoever took our pigs, we would like them back, and they just got lost in the shuffle. They just so many animals got lost in the shuffle just because people were going and taking out animals just that they saw, left, and, they didn't know whether someone was coming back for them or not. And like I said, I was headed back for the ducks that day, but they were already gone. So,
wow.
Yeah, it was kind of different situation for sure. Just to think that someone was coming on your property, is taking your animals, it was
Yeah.
a little disconcerting. And there were also like a lot of looters too. So there was several people in our community that would not leave their homes. They just refused to leave their homes because there was a looting problem. And people were driving around looting homes that had been abandoned. And it was really difficult to tell if people were looting or not, because everybody was driving back in, getting their belongings and hauling them out. And it's like, who's to say whether you're a looter or you're the owner of, when you see people go by with trailers. And it was a pretty scary time, because the neighborhoods had signs up, "You loot, we shoot," and people refusing to leave their homes. And
Wow.
it was pretty scary. We even had the people were getting in trouble for it by the cops, but there were even people in the community that were stopping traffic and checking and saying, "You can't come into our neighborhood if you don't prove you live here." And the cops were like, "You can't do that. You can't just pull over cars." And it was pretty crazy. It was like back to martial law almost. So it was a little scary for me going back there by myself to some degree.
I think to a big degree, because the fire is still there. It's
right.
It's still imminent and impending.
Yes, yeah, the fire was definitely still coming in. It was just slow, and so people, and I don't know how common that is in other situations, because like I said, I've never been through a fire before.
Mm-hmm.
But just the fact that we had to get out fast, but then had the opportunity to go back in, was probably a little bit unusual, and that went on for actually days, just days. Like once we got the animals out, then we just started going back and doing other things, because you had time to go back. So if you have more time, there's more stuff to do. So first thing was we got all the animals out. Those were the first 3 days. And then after that, we just did stuff like, people would tell me like, "Oh, I could help you fireproof your house," and I didn't know how to do that. And they'd say, "I'll meet you down there." And just, some really kind people who knew about fires met me down at my property, and they helped me mow the lawn really short. They helped me haul all the equipment away from the house. We have tractors and trailers and stuff, all that would be something that would make it hard for the firemen to fight a fire around our home. And we dragged it all out to the middle of the pasture. We hosed off our porches, everything wood around the house. We had a wooden fence line that kind of traveled from the ditch, which was full of a tree line. And so we took down that whole yard fence that we used to kind of keep our dogs off the road. That all came out. We just did a bunch of fireproofing stuff, chopping down limbs of trees so that if a fire came, it couldn't get up into the trees because the limbs were all cut till up high. And just really kind people came and helped me do that. My dad came down one day. A bunch of friends came another day. And, every day we would just go down, and if there was time, if the fires looked safe, we just go down and do something, water the porch to prepare for if the fires came through that night. And that just went on for days, basically.
Wow. Well, at the same time, you're at your house, so the looters stay away. So
Yes, yeah. And so people did say, don't go by yourself. Always take somebody with you. And for the most part, I did. I would usually bring somebody with me since my husband was out of town.
Take one of your Aussies or something with you.
Yeah, well, and I mostly left them at my parents' house just because I didn't want them breathing the bad air quality. But I did bring one most of the time when I went, just in case I needed help with something, I don't know what. But yeah, I was pretty worried about them because they're working dogs. I didn't want any damage to their lungs, and I can wear a mask, when I'm down there, I can wear a mask. And so for them, I was trying to be a little bit cautious with them just because I didn't want any damage to their lungs.
Well, and tragedies like that bring out the best in people, and it brings out the worst in people. And you can see that there are people who are like angels, and then there are people who are complete assholes who think it's okay to steal your stuff because there's an opportunity. It just baffles me.
Yeah, and at the same time, then you had other people that were bending over backwards trying to help. Like we had people just driving by being like when we were loading our sheep in the trailer, that one really scary day, it was a double-decker trailer, and it was me and this guy trying to lift these panels up into the double-decker. and you could just hardly breathe, and we were just physically exhausted from setting up panels and stuff. And we just could barely, me and this guy could just barely lift this thing up. And these two people just stopped by on the roads watching us try that. And they're like, hey, let us help you, you know. And I mean, just people were just, everybody in the community just pulled together and was just trying to help each other, which was really, you know, kind of a nice aspect of everything going on.
Yes, yes. So when you were loading that trailer, what part of that did your dog Jill play in that, helping to load the trailer and working with the stock, getting them out of the pasture?
Oh, I mean, without her, it would have been so much harder. I mean, mostly she had to help me get the sheep out of the pasture, because in the pasture, first of all, they were hard to find because it was very smoky. You couldn't see like normal. You couldn't just kind of look out and see where. So I had to drive my Ranger around, kind of checking all the pockets, all the trees, looking for the sheep. And they were, of course, in the farthest corner, hiding under some trees. You know, I'm sure scared. And you know, they don't want to come in. They don't want to come up by the road. And so Jill had to, you know, gather them all up and bring them. And you know, it's hard to see. I couldn't really always see her to make sure she was doing her job. I just had to trust her that she wasn't going to leave any sheep behind. I knew the sheep were stressed. I knew some of the sheep had lambs on them still. And, you know, I was just driving the gator, trying to get where we needed to go. And, you know, I don't know if you ever tried to herd sheep on a gator by yourself. Plus, we have their extremely hilly property. I mean, it just wasn't going to happen with me. And then my breathing was really poor because of the smoke. Like, there was no way I was going to be running around after sheep without, you know, just really huffing and puffing. So really, I could not have brought them in without her. And then we set up these little corrals around where their trailer was. And so then Jill had to bring the sheep in not a normal place where we load. Like, we loaded literally on the road. So she had to bring the sheep through my backyard, through where all the dog kennels and stuff are, and get them into these little corrals that they'd never been in. They had never even been in this area of our property. And, you know, and you kind of like squish them in real tight. And then you have to get them to walk up this ramp. And my sheep had never even seen, like, we don't haul our sheep or trailer them that much. They just kind of live on the farm. And our sheep are mostly production ewes. They're not what I call dog training sheep. I probably have like 10, 15 sheep that I call dog training sheep. And those are like what people consider as like dog training sheep. But the bulk of my sheep are what I call production ewes, and they're used for, you know, breeding and producing lamb. And so those sheep aren't really used to like being handled a lot closely like the dog training sheep are. And, you know, Jill just had to hold them tight, push them up the gate, help make sure they went up the ramp for me. And, you know, like, cause like I said, me and the people helping me were just physically beat because we could hardly breathe, just doing very minimal labor. So without Jill, I don't know why we'd probably still be trying to catch those sheep.
Yeah. Well, you know, you make a good point. The sheep were already probably terrified because they sense something is wrong. Right. They can't breathe either. And there's the smoke they can't see. And sheep that haven't been handled a lot, they're scared of everything. They're not as willing to go where you want them to go. So you had to manhandle them probably inside that trailer, at least until they started seeing their buddies go in there.
Right. Yeah, and they were bedded down under some oaks at the back of our property, which is where they like to be. And, you know, that's where they decided they were going to be safest. And, you know, they didn't think coming up to the road was a good idea. So,
Yeah, and truly, their instinct was totally wrong. Being in the trees was not the best place for them to be at that point.
Right.
But that's sheep for you. Yeah. You know, and I was talking to a really well-known cattle dog breeder of Australian Shepherds, and we were having a really conversation about dogs and what we appreciate about dogs. And she lamented that, you know, a lot of people really don't focus on that sense of group, that not leaving nothing behind in their breeding. And I'm sure you probably noticed that too, that, you know, that's just not always what people talk about. When they're always like, oh, I want a dog that'll, you know, tear up the cows, or, you know, be really strong or whatever. But I want a dog that has a sense of group. Because if your dog did not have a strong sense of group, bunch of your sheep would have been left behind, and you wouldn't have known because you're driving forward in a Ranger, and it's really hard to turn around while you're driving one of those things, and you couldn't see anyway. So that whole sense of group thing, I think this is a perfect story to tell, to demonstrate how important that sense of group is. And breeders, if you're listening, consider that in your next litter that you're breeding, that sense of group. Some dogs have it and some do not.
Yeah.
And the ones that do, I think I'd rather have that than a strong dog. I mean, I want a strong dog too, but that sense of group to me is the most important because, without
well, and another interesting thing, like with Jill, so like my neighbor had sheep and put them in with our sheep. Well, her sheep and my sheep weren't like thinking they were the same flock. And my sheep at least are used to Jill, but the neighbor's sheep weren't used to her at all. And the neighbor's sheep, when we were bringing them in, they were these little Shetland, and they're basically like pet sheep. Like they're very tame sheep, but they were very afraid of the situation. So they were extremely committed to not staying with my sheep and trying to run back to to the neighbor's house. I do remember that happening. And I think it spoke a lot for Jill that she didn't just, she's got her sheep. She was like, no, these sheep are part of what we're doing. And she would keep continually getting the neighbor sheep and putting them, making them come with the group, even though they were pretty committed that they wanted to go back to the neighbor's house.
Yeah, that's amazing. I just appreciate that so much in a dog. So, okay, so I guess, where were we in our story? We kind of got distracted, didn't we?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, basically, I think I just talked about getting all the animals out and then fireproofing the property. Yeah. And then, maybe the last thing that I remember, like, basically the very last thing was getting out important belongings. So, like, at day 5, I started being like, maybe I should get out some valuable stuff, And so I started getting, like, I took out some pictures and things that were important to me and maybe some valuable stuff. And then one person, gave me the idea that I never would have even thought of. They said, go around your property in your house and take pictures of everything. So I remember doing that. And they said, open your drawers, take a picture of all your clothes, all that kind of stuff. I took pictures of every room, all my dog stuff, my X-pens and crates in the basement, all our sheep handling equipment. Because they said, if the fire comes through, then you have that for your insurance proof of what you need to be reimbursed for. And so I remember doing that, but that wasn't till like day 5 because it didn't even occur to me to do that earlier than that when we were worried about the livestock.
Well, that's kind of a solemn task.
Yeah, I remember doing it thinking that, this is kind of sad. I just went around, took pictures of all our gates and, the sheep handling equipment and thinking, boy, it'll be really sad if we lose all this. Took pictures of the tractors and all kind of stuff like that. But then I think it was like September 15th that we got lowered back down to a level 2, which means, be ready to leave. So it wasn't like the fire's done, but it was kind of like they were starting to let people come back. So they said you could come back, but be ready to leave. And about that time was also when Dave was getting back from his trip. And so what we did then was I stayed still at my parents' house with all the dogs because it was just a lot of stress to move them around back and forth if we did have to leave a certain time. But Dave went back home and stayed at the house just to kind of protect it from looters and keep an eye out on stuff. And then I think I looked back at my stuff and it was like September 18th that we got a little bit of rain overnight. And when we got the rain, it was like, hallelujah, because the fires were still there. But there was enough time that the firefighters had built up firewalls around. And then the rain just kind of quieted everything back down. And at that point in time, we said, okay, it's safe to bring all the animals back. I remember bringing the guard dogs back. We brought the sheep back, unloaded the trailers. And it was just like the happiest day. I just remember just being like a big sigh of relief, just watching my guard dogs. Instead of being in my parents' backyard stressed out, they were back in their pasture with their sheep, happy. And all the herding dogs that were trying to live in my parents' garage were back home. And it was just the best day ever.
Yeah, I know. I imagine Dave was probably going nuts when he was on his trip, not being able to help.
He was. Yeah, he was calling me and watching the news, and I'm like, there's nothing really to do. I mean, like all I'm doing is driving back and forth, stressing out, but there's not really anything, other than to wait and see, really. It was just like a wait and see kind of thing. Like, part of me was like, I didn't know what would happen because we got all the livestock out. And I was so grateful we got the livestock out. But then after that, I started thinking, well, what in the world am I going to do with all these sheep if my farm burns down? Because I'm like, they're evacuated, but I have nowhere to put them, no way to feed them if my farm burns down. And so I was kind of feeling like, even though my sheep are evacuated, like it's not free sailing, because if I don't have a farm, I don't have a way to care for my sheep. And so it was just it was a big happy relief when everything worked out for the best and we were able to go back home.
And I imagine you probably didn't sleep very well for a few nights if that fire was still looming, right? It's still there. It's not gone. Right. It's still there.
Right. Yeah, and they have, I learned a whole bunch about fires dealing with this. And what they have is there was a website called Broadcastify. And I download that on my phone, and I would stay up all night, and you could listen to the firefighters talking. You could listen to their broadcast. And it was, I would just stay up and I'd listen for roads, because they'd be like, the fire's coming up road, like Ellis Road or whatever. And I'd be like, oh, that road, I know where it is. Is it close to me? And you're constantly trying to figure out how close is it? Is it coming towards you or, getting better? But yeah, I would stay up all night listening to that.
Wow, that's stressful. That's very stressful. When did they pretty much get the fires out and the danger was completely gone?
I don't think the fires, that fire, the Beachy Creek and the Riverside fire, I mean the Wilhoit fire, because that was the one really close. That one they got under control before we moved back home. That one was done and gone, because that one was so close. If it hadn't been out, we wouldn't have come back. But the Beachy Creek and the Riverside fires, they just kind of turned the other direction and burned back onto themselves, and burned back into the mountains for a ways. But I think it was still burning even after the rains came to some degree. But after the rains came, it was definitely not coming our direction anymore.
Yeah. I remember I was in Colorado for a dog trial around that time, and the same thing was happening in Colorado and a lot of other places. There were just a lot of fires in 2020. And I just remember seeing that in the mountains. You could see the fires burning and the smoke in the mountains. It was crazy. Just crazy.
Yes.
Crazy. And now we have ice storms, so we'll see.
Yeah, if it's not a fire at our house, now it's ice storms. We're getting our share of natural disasters, I guess.
Right. So looking back on this situation, I'm guessing you probably talked a lot about some of the lessons that you learned and some of the things that you might do differently now in preparation for something like that. What are some of those lessons that you learned and some of the advice you give somebody to be ready to evacuate for something, even if it's a hurricane or flooding or whatever?
Right. Yeah, because all the different things, I think it was pretty unusual for us to be able to go back and forth. I think that was, but also I think because we were able to do that, I learned a lot, because you kind of had time to research and learn stuff. I just think before it even occurs, have in your head what your priorities are, and because you can't get everything out. You have to just have some depending on what the situation is, you're going to have to be prepared to make decisions on what to sacrifice. And for us, the animals were the number one priority. It was get the animals out as fast and as efficiently as you can, and all other material possessions could be replaced, and so with the dogs, that was my number one thing. I was glad that we had our vehicles set up to transport dogs, because that's what we had to do. We had a bunch of dogs, and luckily our dogs were used to being transported, because we take them everywhere with us, and we do a lot of traveling for trials and stuff. So our dogs are used to traveling, and our vehicles are set up for it, which made things quite easy. But that was our main priority, was to have things ready, because we were able to get those dogs out very quickly. Once we made the call that we're leaving, it was not very long for us to get all those dogs loaded, get their dog food loaded, get their bowls, get their food, and then just grab a few important papers. That was our main thing. And then coming back for the sheep, that was really just me having good friends willing to help and bring their trailers. And, there's no substitute for having friends that are willing to help you out in a sticky situation.
Yeah, and friends those are really good friends because they're putting their safety at risk too, because that fire is dangerous.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. And I think having a plan, like, what is our plan if something happens here? What is it? And having your important papers in like a fireproof safe or a waterproof little handled safe or a box that is a go bag, really, like having all that stuff ready to go in an emergency is probably a good idea. And, where are you going to put your dogs and how are you going to load them up? And just having that plan in your head and being organized in your life so everything is nearby. You don't want to live in fear, but you also want to be prepared.
Right. So. Right. Because, we really had no ideas for taking where we would evacuate our livestock to. The dogs were pretty easy because I just knew my parents would, welcome us at any time. But the livestock, I really had no backup plan for them. I had no ideas of what I would do. It was really just people out of the goodness of their heart calling me saying, we will take your sheep, bring your sheep, we will help you get your sheep and they can stay here. So maybe in the future, if I was more planning ahead, I would have an idea of who that would be ahead of time rather than just wait for people to call and offer. But I had more people calling and offering to help than I knew. It was just so many people were willing to help and help the animals. People were really wanting to help animals, which was a very refreshing and happy thing, I thought.
Yeah, and that's the benefit of it's just people, the best in people come out in those types of situations. And I know we've had, not where I live in Central Texas, but, in South Texas, they have hurricanes and flooding. And just last year they had a lot of flooding and people were just on Facebook and social media saying, hey, if you need to bring your animals somewhere, you can bring them here. We've got plenty of room. And, just the community outreach like that, it becomes wonderful in an emergency. But definitely having a plan, how are you going to get them out? Mm-hmm. Where am I going to have a double-decker trailer pop up out of the blue, right?
Right. Yeah. Our fairgrounds were opening up and taking in animals. Our local fairgrounds all over the place, all up and down the I-5 corridor, were opening up to people bringing their animals in. And I would say a fair number of people ended up doing that, but I was lucky to have just private people offer to help me, so that way my animals weren't exposed to the mass numbers of animals that were coming through at the fairgrounds like they had.
Yeah, and your animals were safer from theft and loss at that point as well, too, because, and people here in Houston, Texas, we've dealt with several hurricanes, and spray paint your phone number on your horses, and they've done that in the fire areas of California as well too. And mark your animals like your dogs for sure. Make sure they're microchipped and have collars on them. And this is something I'm going to just say this too. We talked about it on one of our last episodes with Sarah Dixon about dog training, and a lot of people really are resistant to crate training their dogs. There are a lot of people nowadays who are like, oh, it's kind of mean. And I'm like, okay, whatever. But it is a skill. And Sarah put it best. She said it is a life skill for a dog to learn. Yes. Even if you're not going to use a crate in your house, you're like, oh, my dog doesn't need a crate. Great. But it is a life skill for your dog. Right. Number one, it's not safe to drive them around without them being in a crate. So, but it's a life skill. If you have to be evacuated, or if you end up at a fairgrounds or a community center where they're like, hey, you can have your dog, but they have to be crated, that dog being in a crate then becomes secure for them and not a terrifying thing. So, it's like in this conversation along those same lines, I'm thinking my guard dogs need to be trained to at least go in a car every now and then or something, or leash trained. One of mine is sort of leash trained. The other one, she's older, and I got her from somebody, and she's never been leash trained. And I'm thinking, gosh, she'll be really upset and it'll be really stressful for her if something happens or I have to leave and they have to come with me. Right. So it's a lot of really good stuff to think about.
Yeah. Luckily, our guard dogs were all leash broke, because we move them around on leashes and stuff. And I had, when they were pups, sort of crate trained all of them in that. I had a crate, and I would feed them in the crate and make them just a crate out in the middle of the field just to get them ready if I had to take them to the vet. And, I do think that was quite helpful because at my parents' house, my parents are not, like, they love dogs, but they're not dog people, if that makes sense. And having that many dogs stay in their garage, was kind of a big deal to them. And, all the dogs had to be in crates, and they could be out in the fenced yard during the day. But at night, we brought them all in, and they all had to sleep in crates just so that way they weren't going to, bother the neighbors or anything. And having them crate trained was, a big benefit.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and you and I wouldn't think twice about having one of our regular dogs in crates, because that's just what we do, because we travel and, they're created at trials, and we're used to that because that's part of their life, But for people who don't do that, I think it's important to think about it. And I think that's a brilliant idea. My next guard dog puppy will be trained a lot better as far as leashes go. Maybe even crate training.
Yeah. I wouldn't say that they were crate trained, but they kind of knew if I kind of pushed them in a crate, they just kind of went in and didn't fight me super bad.
They're crate familiar.
Right. That's exactly what I would say.
Not scared anyway. Yeah. Oh my goodness. So life after the fire, is everything back to normal?
Yeah. I think, it was funny because there was so much ash in the air, and everything was just covered in soot, and even in your house, like everything would be sooty and ashy. But after the rain, like it was just like we finally got the first rain, and it just washed everything away. And it's kind of like it was a distant memory that never happened, that it's just, but if you drive past the places that burned, it sure reminds you, but luckily my neighborhood and the places I go never got scorched. But so it's kind of like just this distant dream of, did that really happen? Did I really live through it? But yeah, I mean, you drive through those areas and they're just devastated.
Yeah, and they will be for, that doesn't go away, for a long time. It's sometimes necessary. They say fire is revitalizing, but it takes a long time to come back.
That's for sure.
From it.
That's for sure.
Oh, my goodness. So, anything else you want to share with us about this story and what you've learned, or advice?
I just think be flexible, be ready for anything, accept help when you need it, and also be able to tell people no when, because sometimes people want to help too much, or, I just think when you're put in a situation like that, I just tried to do the best that I could with what I had. And I tried to make the best decisions I could at the time and just kind of be okay with it. Like it was really hard to leave the sheep that first day because I was, it was, like you were worried, like you felt like you were abandoning them. And it was hard because, most of those ewes all of the ewes I've had since they were babies, like they were born here, I've raised them. And, they trust you, and, you just have to, but there was no way to get them out that first day. You just had to get the dogs out and get yourself out. And, you just kind of look at it and be like, I did the best I could with what I had. And for me, luckily, it all worked out and had a happy ending. But I know it doesn't always work out like that. And I just think it's important for people to just to be kind to themselves and realize, everybody does the best they can with what they have in a given situation. And luckily for me, it all worked out in a really good and positive way.
Yeah, I'm very glad to hear that, because you're right. Not oftentimes, but occasionally it does not work out and people perish in trying to save animals and things like that. So, but it's hard to, I can't even imagine. I understand the same thing. All my ewes have been here since they were born, and, you take care of them. That's your job. And to have to turn your back and walk away, that would be really hard, but you have to save your human life. It's such a difficult thing. And I'm so glad that it worked out for you. I'm so, so glad. So glad. Well, I really appreciate you being on and talking about this and sharing what you've learned, and really proud of Miss Jill for doing her part to help save your sheep. That was exciting.
Yes. I love my special girl, Jill. She's a very good dog.
Well, can you send a picture of her and I'll post it in the show notes and people can see her?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Yep.
Awesome.
I can send you a good picture of her.
Good. Well, thank you very much for being on, and I wish you guys lots of success and prosperity in the years to come.
Thank you so much.
Hey, and that's the show today. Thanks for joining me. I hope you really enjoyed it and got to learn something about this amazing breed, the Australian Shepherd. Join us on Facebook. We have a private group called the Instinctive Australian Shepherd. Join the group and join the conversation there. You can also find us online at theinstinctiveaussie.com. That's where you'll find all the show notes, the links to anything we talked about this show, and all of our past episodes. Subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever else you find your favorite podcasts, and that way you'll be the first ones to know as soon as an episode is uploaded. All right, everyone, I'll see you down the road.